Hey, everybody. I'd like to welcome Sandra Coiner to the show today. She is a fellow counselor. In fact, we literally share a wall at Girl Wellness Group where we work. But she's also a Reiki master, she's a yoga teacher, and a death doula. And Sandra, what we do here on the podcast is pretty straightforward, and that's to discuss how the outer circumstances of our lives are stimulating our inner experience in two very distinct ways. And one is that is through what we call the psychological ego as counselors. And the second is through the divine soul connection to all that is. And so, why do I think it's important to know the difference? Well, this is where you come in as our guest to help me and everyone else who might be listening to relate to this inner conflict within ourselves and give us ideas on how to integrate these two very different perspectives into one full, beautiful, messy human experience. So, Sandra, jump on in and finish introducing yourself.
Thank you. I've been a Reiki master teacher for probably about 20 years, and that kind of led me in a weird way to yoga teacher training, which was not on my radar at the time. And that was one of the best things I've done. And that probably was a good introduction to me about ego on the mat. And I just kind of like how everything I've dabbled in has kind of morphed together like the threads of a quilt, perhaps, to make one bigger whole. And so I've done tuning fork practitioner training, oracle card certifications. I run a monthly Death Cafe meeting. And so I just have a lot of interests like that, and they all come together. And I love how they are able to emerge in the therapy practice, if you will.
Yeah, and like I said, I sit next to you and share a wall, so I know you just see people for traditional therapy, right? And that I know you have a certain love in that area too, which is
Absolutely. And I do make sure that my clients know the first time I meet them, this is my background. It's very metaphysical. We can invite that into the therapy space. And if you don't like that, I won't be offended. We leave it on the back burner. So it's up to everyone who walks in.
No, I love that. Because I know sometimes we're working with clients and I'll see you work with someone in a very traditional sense, right? You love OCD, or not love it, but you like to work with people in that capacity. And I'm sure that's not metaphysical at all.
Correct. Yeah. That's a little bit more blunt.
Yeah, well, so I mean, like you can meet people anywhere along the road, right, so to speak,
Absolutely.
and that's because initially you were probably more of a traditional, psychology, person, and then, like you said, I added all these other trainings, and now you're leading death cafes. It's like it's cool to hear your whole journey, but I'd love to start at the beginning.
Sure.
Where and when did you recognize that you even had an ego?
Well, I knew you were going to ask me that. And so I had to think, because I think that this becomes clearer the older we get. Sorry to young listeners. But so I was thinking back, and I thought of three particular memories that are ego-based, and then how they morphed. And so when I was in middle school, I was that really, really shy person who didn't say a word. And when I graduated 8th grade, that really bothered me. And I didn't like being picked on for being super shy. And so I did what we therapists call opposite action. I remember consciously making a decision to act in the opposite manner and put myself out there. So one could say that the shyness was the ego protecting me, but one could also say it was the ego that decided to engage in opposite action and conform more to what is acceptable to society. I think also then when I headed off to college, I didn't know what I wanted to do, like a lot of people. And I decided to get a degree in telecommunications. I thought that I wanted to be a TV anchor, which looking back on that is just hilarious. But I did get offered an internship with one of the big 3 networks in Chicago. I turned it down. I got offered a job as a producer with one of the top rated talk shows at that time. And this is where, man, I wish I had understood more about soul and inner truth then. Getting offered that job threw me into a 2-week spiral. I that's all I can call it. I was at such, it was such an argument within me going on. Do I take that job that anybody would probably jump at, or what is it exactly that's fighting within me that's just like questioning this? And ultimately, I decided not to take that job, which was a very peaceful revelation when I passed it up. And it was the wrong space for me. I don't even watch the news. I don't like the news. The whole thing, it was the wrong space for me. I didn't know it at the time because I do believe it was more the ego trying to make these decisions for me.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I love that you even said your ego itself can have several perspectives, right? Mm-hmm. So I simplified it at the beginning by saying we have two perspectives, but that is what is so tricky about the ego is it does play chess with us. And it does say, well, if you don't like me, yeah, we can't be shy to protect ourselves anymore. We got to get out there and do this opposite thing. And that is why it's so difficult for an ego to see itself. It's because it's constantly becoming a chameleon without wanting to change, which is a paradox, right? But then, so what part of you when you were younger was choosing to go into telecommunications, right? Where you said, I finally had this come to Jesus moment where the peace overrid it and I didn't take it, which I would call your soul, right? But like what drove you, what ego, thought drove you to that at first, the anchor?
I would kind of compare it to today's world where everybody wants to be an influencer. It's just that I think idea of you want to be seen, you want to be heard, you want to feel like you're important. Yeah. And that so does not resonate with me, and didn't know that at the time. But I would say that what I do remember in high school, I dabbled with, you'll love this, self-hypnosis cassette tapes. That doesn't age me. And I always felt like there's something more. There's something to this hypnosis. There's something that it can pull out. I felt more of a calling to that kind of a path. And so I really do think my early 20s, my spiritual beliefs started to shift, and yoga teacher training, the reason that fell into my plate, which, like I told you, I had no intention of teaching yoga. But at that point in time, I knew that whenever I hit little bouts of depression, there was a yoga class in Shavasana that immediately made me feel better. And I wanted to share that with other people. So again, being an introvert, wasn't so sure about this, but dove into teacher training where the ego's on the mat all the time. The ego sits on the yoga mat and says, I should be able to do that pose, or the person next to me can do it, so I can do it, right? Then we head into trouble because maybe we actually should not be doing that pose. And so it's a struggle of what does the body need versus what is the mind saying that I should be able to do? Because the ego likes comparisons.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's funny because I think that's why I resist yoga. Exactly what you just said. I'm like, I just can't do that, And it's you think it's the slow, like I'm a very like moving person, like I like to get on a treadmill or whatever. But like the slowness of the yoga, I don't think it's that my body doesn't like it. I think it's my mind doesn't like it. And to your point, I think that's interesting that you got to this point where but it made you feel better. Yeah. Right. And so, so before when you were younger, just to recap, it sounds like maybe the real you is a more shy, not shy, I don't know if that's right, laid back or observing type of person or soul personality. And then, but you also, your ego engaged in the opposite, which is to be seen, which ended up lovingly integrating into the person who you are now, which is you are more reserved and you are more kind of wait for people to sort of come towards you. But I also think I've been with you in yoga class, and you do command the space, and you are comfortable being in front of people, but not as a see me type of person, more as like, let me guide you, which sounds, like a wonderful integration of the ego and the soul, or the personality and the soul?
Well, you're a good therapist. You certainly pinpointed me. You're so right. You're very right. I mean, I like the definition of introvert that isn't about not liking to be with people or not being shy. I don't feel shy anymore, but I do feel large groups, unless I'm leading them, they drain my energy. So I have to protect that.
Yeah. Well, and I notice like just in our interactions, you know, I feel like I'm the type of person that wants people to walk into my office too. And but I notice that I would like to walk into your office. Like, it's like, yeah, she invites people, but it's not come see me, you know, or, you know, it's more of like, it's just more of an invitation. And I think the invitation is more of the soul, essence of who you are. And so how did you get in touch with the soul? Were you always in touch with the soul, or you said my spiritual beliefs changed, but
yeah. So this, and I don't even know if you want to go off on this tangent, because
yep.
A lot happened in my early 20s where I formed very concrete spiritual, I would say religious, but I put it in air quotes, beliefs that I don't waver on. I mean, I had my validations, I had signs, I completely believe what I believe. And so that started me off. And then, you know, this thing about ego in Sanskrit, the word I would use is Mara. Mara is, represents illusion in the Buddhist stories, right? And so when we label, and I appreciate you introducing me with my labels, right? That's so your listeners, your viewers, have some type of idea of what I'm bringing to the table. Right. However, if I tell you, you know, these are my labels, I went to Indiana University, I'm a mom, I have a sister, it still doesn't tell you who I am. It's just giving you an outline. And so to me, the ego is, it's about this term, it's from the Bhagavad Gita, meaning I-ness. So capital I hyphen N-E-S-S, I-ness.
Okay.
The ego is about what I think I am and what I portray to other people. And so I often will tell my kids, or, you know, my friends, if I'm feeling off, I tell them I'm having a human day. To me, that means my yogi side is somewhere back there.
Yeah.
And human emotions are at the forefront. And it's the human emotions that would cause me to get mad at somebody or judge somebody. When I'm in my yogi space, I really do consciously make an effort to look at somebody and think, you know what, that's a soul who is on a spiritual journey, much like me. We're all at different points in the path. And when I think that way, it's amazing how you can set aside your judgments, right?
Yeah. So you would say in your mind, you would call the ego more of the judger, and then the soul would be more of the non-judgmental space where you accept a person. They have a personality and they have labels, but there's really way more to them that I maybe will never know, or but are interested in knowing. And I can't know them if I judge anything that my ego has laid out.
True. And I think the ego, when we're stuck in an ego state, it separates us from the soul state. I mean, they coexist. You know, I read once, the ego is like your shadow. You have a physical body, so therefore you have a shadow, and that's the ego. But when we die and we pass on, the ego is left behind. It has to be. There's no body left. And so it's the soul that's moving forward. And to me, that's the part we want to get to know while we're here. That's the lesson.
Yes, absolutely. But I do think there's also a reason to have an ego, at least in the world, right? And then also a separate personality, which to your and then somehow, you know, wanting to integrate all of that. So I'm putting words in your mouth. You just kind of described what the ego was. What do you call the soul, or do you call it the soul, or you said you call it your yogi self? Like, how do you define that?
I kind of like the Sanskrit term Atman. And an Atman it means essence. It's your true self. Once you've peeled back all the layers, it is your very true self. And that is the part of us, I believe, that is here to learn. And I do resonate with this idea that we all have our own answers. It's the ego that's going to have me calling you in. Hey, what do you think of this? What's your opinion? What do you think I should do? And then I call, somebody else and go, what do you think of this? Because I'm searching, right? When if I can quiet the ego and the mind chatter, I can tap into that Atman where the answer already exists, in my opinion.
Yeah. And so knowing that, like you said, we have all the answers, why do you think God or whatever created us wants us to be talking? Like, why should we be collaborating? Like you said, if I'm here to learn my own path and not ask others, as therapists, we know people are coming to ask us all the time. So why do we do that? What do you think the soul wants that collaboration for if it already knows?
I don't think we're taught to listen to our inner voice. I mean, I know we're not taught to listen to our inner voice.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And if you don't stumble onto that path, how do you ever learn that? And then how do you learn to trust that inner voice over what the ego is telling you?
Yeah.
Right?
That's a big question. That's what I feel like we're doing here right now on this planet. Exactly what you just said. How do you trust the inner voice over the collective ego that informs your personal ego, right? And messes with your personality.
Yes.
Because that's a lot of what, I think, like you said, when I offer the metaphysical option to my clients, they may not be comfortable with it, but that's because they're in the space of just understanding that they even have an ego, maybe, and even,
Sure.
have to deal with that. So,
right.
so
and
you
if I may say, I don't want to interrupt you, but to that point, when we tell someone they have an ego, that sounds very judgmental. People interpret it as a judgment.
Yes, absolutely. And so now you've walked through yoga training, right? And you said, and that was where you first saw the ego on the mat and that you help other people work through that. Mm-hmm. What led you towards the next steps of your journey, Reiki or death doula?
Yeah. So my Reiki practice was picking up and I started to realize, got quite a few clients who have PTSD. And as a yoga instructor, I like to do guided meditations. And the thought came to me that, what if I trigger somebody? What if I say the wrong thing on a guided meditation and I don't know how to help someone? And so that started to veer me off towards going back and getting my master's and getting my LPC, which is now my LCPC. And I think that all the things I've done collaborate really well together. I love that knowing the chakras, the energy centers in the body, helps me with somebody who's come in to vent about something going on in their life. I have a better idea of their energy. And it's also, the chakras are also encompassing.
Yeah. So cool what you just said. I came to become an LCPC late in life after I did all the other things where I, went to
much later in life.
Yeah, I did numerology, like I did all the things. And so we did sort of the opposite. I think a lot of people will do traditional or clinical therapy. And then they're like, well, this isn't healing the person. It's helping them put words to what they're experiencing, which is half the battle, or that putting words to the harmful emotion that doesn't cycle, right? But and I think that's why we're so comfortable with metaphysics, because we did it before, right? That we became a counselor. And I know why I became a counselor after doing all that. Why did you go back and do that? You said it was PTSD, but as someone who already believed, like, I have the answers, why did you go back to?
For sure, but I have the answers for me. I don't mean I have your answers or I have
great clarification. Yes.
If I were to believe that, that would be pure ego.
Yes. Great clarification. Yeah. Awesome.
So, no,
and so
I don't have everyone's answers, but I was interested. The timing was right. And just like yoga fell into my lap, so did OCD. That was not necessarily initially on my radar, but I'm so fascinated by exposure therapy and I just enjoy it a lot.
So your ego didn't take you to become an LCPC. You view that as a soul calling to say, hey, you got to meet people where they're at in that trauma space. And there are people who have figured this out and do make clinical recommendations on how to do that. But then you also then brought in some of the I don't know what else you do with people, but yeah, I mean, you know what I'm saying? So like an ego that went through telecommunications in your childhood, like as you got older, same with me, going back to school felt very soul based, felt
Yeah.
very like, okay, I want to understand what I don't know that's meets people in the world when they walk into a session,
Yeah.
right? And there's just more clarity around that. And so I appreciate that you did that. And then how did that finally lead you to become a death doula?
That certification I did prior to COVID.
Okay.
I didn't really know what one was. I saw it pop up on Facebook. And I knew from my Reiki practice, I'm really comfortable around death. I'm comfortable sitting with someone who's dying. And I just wanted to see what it was all about. So that certification, I'm not a practicing death doula because I don't honestly have time, but I incorporate all of that. And that comes out in the Death Cafe meetings. And I would say the majority, I only know a couple people probably who don't have a fear of death. I would put me in that category. I don't fear it, but the majority of people do. And to me, this all comes back to a theme that is prevalent within the confines of my office is attachment. Patanjali is the father of yoga. He wrote the Yoga Sutras, and he talks about how attachment is one of the kleshas, and a klesha is an obstacle. And if you can free yourself from that fear, that obstacle, all is well, right?
Yeah.
But as humans, we struggle so much with this idea of death because it forces us to sit with uncertainty. And most people do not like uncertainty because it raises anxiety. So we get stuck in this loop, right?
Yeah, our egos aren't good with it.
The ego does not like the topic at all because it goes back to this idea of I-ness, right?
Yes.
If I'm going to die, what legacy am I leaving behind, which is ego? Where are all my things going? That's ego.
Yeah.
What about all my labels that create my identity? That's all ego.
Yes.
And it's very hard when we are not taught in this society that death is a topic that is as natural as birth, or should be.
That's right.
To engage there.
Yeah, and the ego literally does die. The ego, because it's an illusion, it's a false sense of ourselves. So it literally it is the thing that dies. And so it makes sense that that is where all the anxiety comes from. And that's why it's so important for people, I think, to integrate a perspective of, yes, you're going to have a part of you that is false, that will be afraid of its annihilation because it will happen. But you yourself will go on, and maybe you don't have a sense of that self even exists. Right. And so I guess, how did you become comfortable with that to the point where you can literally say, like, I'm just not afraid of death? It's a natural thing. It makes me human to die, you know?
Yeah. So let me back up. So like I said, I've been doing Reiki for about 20 years.
Yeah.
Somewhere in the middle of that, or maybe a little bit before that, I remember meditating very strongly while I was doing Reiki on someone. And I had this vision pop into my head of another person, and I could hear a voice talking to me. And was able to relay this to my client, who pulled out a picture of this person. And we were like, oh my gosh. And that was really one of the first times that I associated really being able to tap into ajna, that third eye chakra, in your intuition and in meditation, and hear things and know things and see things that we're not taught to do either, which I do believe everyone can learn Reiki and everyone can learn to tap into that. But that started to validate for me what I was believing, because I would say something and the person would go, oh my God, how did you know that? And I don't know how I knew that. It was just coming to me, right? So all those experiences, plus, my spiritual shift in the early 20s, have validated for me that I believe we reincarnate. I believe that when we die, it's going home. Yeah. And I've had dreams to that effect, and they stay with me. And you might say, well, that's ridiculous. That's a dream. It's just a belief. You have no facts. I don't. But it's so interesting how many things we believe in that we can't see. Yet this topic in particular sends people's anxiety all the way up to the roof, right?
Yeah. So as someone who, as I went on my spiritual journey, I also could hear, and I had all of that stuff happen, the downloading and the being able to tell people about someone who's passed over and all that. So all that happened to me, but I still had a huge fear of death. And what I have come to believe about that at this point in my life is I love my persona. Like when will never exist again. And it does feel sad to me when I think of like my mom's persona is gone, my dad's persona is gone. It will never exist again. And I try to put it in that context, but it was interesting because I literally had a deep understanding and knowing about that we were going home, about that we are infinite, we will last forever. But yet I was also, and I still am, super attached to my persona. I love being this personality, if that makes sense. And so it's really interesting to now try hard to flip into, this is one of many personas you'll ever take on or have took on, and to start to fall in love with the death process, the dying process. And do you have any like words of wisdom for someone like me who wants to fall literally in love with the fact that this persona is temporary, it will be over, and
Okay.
I want to embrace that and be like, and appreciate death. You know what I'm saying? Like appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. I think love is a strong word. I think most people listening to this are going to be like, wait a minute. I don't want to love death.
Yeah.
I just want to be able to sit in a room where it's being talked about. But
Yeah.
as to your question, I would ask you, what's your option?
I can't put.
Right? I mean, you get to fear death, and
Yeah.
you get to struggle and ruminate and be anxious about it and worry about it. Or you release the attachment and you come to my dark side.
Yeah, no, I love that. You're right. I mean, what is the option? Like that just answers the question completely. Oh yeah. And I guess maybe that just makes me so appreciative every day and great. I literally am grateful to wake up as my persona. You know, and I didn't have that before. And it took me getting over my ego viewpoint in the lead to understand that I could just appreciate and be grateful waking up as this.
Sure.
You know, and every step of it, like my 5-year-old self, my 20-year-old self, my 53-year-old self, and hopefully my, 80-year-old self. And so, anyway, I'm just going off on a tangent about all that. But yeah, I love what you said. I mean, that's just, there's nothing else to say after that.
Okay, and the other thing is, you're making a huge assumption that you're going to not like your next self even more.
Yeah.
I mean, so to me, my grandfather used to drill into my sister and I, you have to be curious. You've got to stay curious about life and you have to stay aware. And those were his 2 words. And so can you get curious that maybe that next body that I emerge into has even more interesting things going on and more to teach me.
Yeah. And be with the personalities that I love, who's not to say that those souls won't go on to have even more fun personalities as we keep evolving, right? Because we are evolving. I mean, as weird as the earth looks right now, or at least in our society, right? It's still, we are evolving. We definitely have. And I don't doubt that whatsoever. So that's great. So people can meet you on so many different levels, right? At the Death Cafe, at the yoga mat. They can meet you in your office, just doing something around, OCD, which, like you said, I love meeting people there, all the way to, other myriad of just anxious, producing experiences, right? Which is great. You're like a triple threat, as they say. Yeah, and so
I'm gonna own that.
Yeah, you should. So I know how to find you because you're right next door to me, but like someone listening,
Sure.
Where would they find you?
So you're going to find me at Grow Wellness Group, or it's Sandra at growwellnessgroup.com. My website is Inspired by Earth.
Well,
I
I
have a
haven't seen
YouTube
that.
channel.
Inspired by Earth. I gotta write that down. Inspired by Earth.
I started a YouTube channel when COVID hit so that all my yoga classes would be online. So you can go there.
Wow.
Grow owns its own, or has its own yoga. That's where I teach.
Yeah.
And the Death Cafe meets here the third Wednesday of every month.
And that's open to non-clients?
Oh, yeah. Anybody who wants to show up, it's free. There's no agenda. It's an amazing discussion that it's really interesting. I mean, we've talked about a myriad of topics.
I
And I
bet.
learned so much.
Yeah. That's awesome. Okay. Inspired by Earth is your website. And I assume like people can find you
Sure.
outside of that too. Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much,
Absolutely.
Romy.
You got it.
Yeah, for coming on. I appreciate it. And I'll see you at work tomorrow.
All right. Thanks for inviting me.